Hello and welcome to our Writing Workshop series. This is a collaboration between the North Bay Public Library and members of the North Bay Writers Group. My name is Bethany, and I will be your host for this series. Each episode in this series will focus on different writing topics, including story creation, dialogue, research, and more. Each episode will also feature different hosts from the North Bay Writers Group. On this episode, Jared will talk about conceptualization and implementation.
Hello everyone. My name is Jared Hill, and welcome to my first workshop with you here at the North Bay Public Library. Today, we will discuss conceptualization and implementation in writing. This is to say, coming up with a very basic story idea, expanding on the concept, and formulating a cohesive idea into a full-length tale for others to enjoy. To begin, I will speak of my own experience in practicing this art form. Afterward, I will look in depth on expanding the idea, generating a plot, and the methodologies necessary to make your future short story, poem, book, a more potential reality. All without giving away too much information for later topics we will be discussing in future workshops. To start, I would like to talk about my experience while writing my full-length novel, Synthetic Sun. One day, I was thinking deeply about the world's current state of affairs. Excessive poverty, constant war, corrupt rich people perpetuating and hoarding wealth, politicians with no agenda outside of their own interests of the people, the rising issue of the climate crisis. This and numerous other issues had me wondering, what would it take to make all of this sadness stop? I could think of only one answer. If all those causing this suffering and ignoring their responsibilities had disappeared. Then I had to consider how that could happen. Natural disaster was a method that would negatively affect too many people who are already suffering of this ignorance. It seems silly, but I thought of some of my favorite characters. Deadpool from Marvel, Superman, One Punch Man, and the God Emperor from the Dune series. One thing these characters have in common, they are virtually indestructible. They are constantly faced with increasingly difficult challenges, yet always find a way to overcome. In the case of One Punch Man, unfazed and unbothered. I knew I wanted this book to be a sci-fi. I had recently become obsessed with Frank Herbert's Dune series, and decided if I were to write a sci-fi, I would want it to be written in a way that is more sci and less fi. That is to say, I wanted it written to be scientifically possible. Thus, the conclusion was made to mix the concepts of such characters as One Punch Man and others mentioned to defeat the evil of the modern age. I created a character known as Ion. Ion would later become a former Canadian minister as I wrote the story. He would have asked the same questions I have asked and found a similar answer. I had to create a scientist character, his brother, to make what I had decided Ion to become possible. Ion would become a cyborg that is nothing more than a brain in a robot. Not just a cyborg, no. One with an indestructible outer shell. And after all is said and done, the reader will be left wondering, what does it mean to be human? I remember generating the first ideas in my head while I was at home, staring at a blank whiteboard, and was ready to have brainstormed concepts etched upon it. While looking into this metaphorical void, I asked myself the previous questions. At the same time, I knew how that story would end. I'm not going to ruin the end for you in case any of you decide to read my book one day. But the point here is, I asked very specific questions, and through rational answers, developed a concept that is both in a way realistic and set up what I felt would be an amazing story. So, to focus on the main points of this whole experience with you, I first expanded the idea. To do so, I asked myself what-if questions. What if he had parts of his brain removed to make himself less aggressive, was one question I asked. This was because being essentially a god and indestructible, this character became very violent. So the answers to that question for me was that he would not only lose part of his brain, but a part of himself by doing this. I want you to think of this method as if you are walking through a series of doors in a massive house. Each door has a brief description on it. The what-if questions, to be specific. When you choose the one you wish to enter, your perception is what generates the figurative answers behind it. As a writer, it is your duty to look behind each door and choose which one best suits the story you are trying to tell. Even in fiction, the concept of cause and effect is extremely vital. If you have a knight slay a dragon, odds are there will be thankful villagers and a wealth for them to decide what to do with. It is up to you if you decide the knight shares the wealth with the poverty-stricken peasants, keeps it for himself or herself, or even leaves it there without a care, among countless other possibilities. Writing a story is not just developing a set of scenarios or characters, it is creating an entire plot that builds an entire world. Now let us discuss the concepts of generating a plot. Once you have a main idea, character, or scenario you wish to flesh out, as it were, the next step is to develop a plot around it. How did this character get to where they are? Where will they be going from there? Who even is the character and the world they live in? All this must be decided by the writer, and without conceptualization, a major aspect of your tale, you will not even have a plot to develop to begin with. For example, I conceptualized Ion as a cyborg, an indestructible robot with a human brain. How did he come to be such a thing? A want for justice, a willingness for sacrifice, and a scientific genius for a brother, all coalesced to create what was needed for this person's concept of utopia to come to be. That being said, the infamous 5 W's is a more excellent source than one would think to generate these questions, and in turn form these scenarios. It is important to remember that while you are creating a story in your mind, you are creating an entire world for your reader. In my opinion, something to avoid in order to do that is the concept of beating a dead horse. Generating as an original an idea as you possibly can is imperative. Drawing inspiration from other works for plot points is not a bad thing, but be sure to create your own take on it and not steal an entire book's worth of ideas and simply claim them as your own. Now that we have some kind of concept of the plot as well as developing ideas from conceptions, let us discuss methodologies on how to implement these. There are a few bits of advice I would like to share with you that will specifically help you move from a mere idea to an entire story's worth of concepts. First off, keep it simple. Sometimes, delving too deep in one aspect of a character, plot, environment, etc., will steal you away from the overall story you are trying to tell. Do not spend an entire chapter focusing on the antagonist's clothes, for example, if you are trying to teach the reader about them. You have ample time to add details here and there as the story progresses. Make the most important points the first ones you mention. My next piece of advice is to embrace the obscure. You are creating a world. Do not think there is such thing as too far out there. Use logic, make your own rules, and set parameters for you to abide by, and implement that to dictate if something can be a part of your world or not. Strive for originality. Paying homage or borrowing concepts is the foundation for almost all writing. Sci-fi in specific is notorious for doing that frequently. For example, Dune had great deals of inspiration towards Star Wars and even aspects of Star Trek, among countless other sci-fi works. However, basing things off your own experience is often the ultimate and most unique way to tell a tale. In the case you are writing something that reflects your ideologies more than your actual life, doing research and morphing pre-established ideas may be the sole route in which you can take. No matter what, do everything you can to create your own world using your own reality. Research. Even when writing fiction, it is imperative that you base your descriptions and scenarios on something that is actually plausible. If you are to have your hero suffer from third-degree burns from a dragon for a fantasy, a flamethrower for a war scene, or something along those lines, don't have them fully healed the next day. Even with a healing factor, it makes the character less relatable and interesting for this kind of unrealistic circumstance. Moreover, this gives other opportunities for inspiration. Is there someone similar to the villain you were trying to create that has existed? How did their life go? Has there been a similar war or battle you were writing in reality? Research it and share similarities with the actual result from these historical moments. There is no telling how helpful research can be in any given circumstance. To conclude, we as writers are gifted, if not cursed, with the ability to create entire worlds from our minds. In my experience, there will frequently be lightning in a bottle moments where one aspect of a story is sparked. Follow it through the rabbit hole and don't be afraid to expand. Use the 5 W's. Think logically and be creative as possible. You never know if you could change someone's life with a story or even define a genre. I would like to finish this presentation with a quote from Alan Watts. Advice? I don't have advice. Stop aspiring and start writing. If you're writing, you're a writer. Write like you're a death row inmate and the governor is out of the country and there's no chance for a pardon. Write like you're clinging to the edge of a cliff, white knuckles on your last breath, and you've got just one last thing to say. Like you're a bird flying over us, and you can see everything. And please, for God's sake, tell us something that will save us from ourselves. Take a deep breath and tell us your deepest, darkest secret, so we can wipe our brow and know that we're not alone. Write like you have a message for a king. Or don't, who knows? Maybe you're one of the lucky ones who doesn't have to. This has been Jared Hill for the North Bay Public Library. Thank you so much for listening today. We'll see you next time.
NBPL Podcasts is a production of the North Bay Public Library. Thanks for listening. We hope you enjoyed this episode. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss future episodes. Also, if you know someone who might be interested in this series, please share this with them. Thanks to the North Bay Writers Group for sharing their time and talents in this series. If you'd like to learn more about this group, there is a link to their Facebook group in the show notes. Follow the North Bay Public Library on Facebook and connect with us on Twitter and Instagram at North_Bay PL.